And so the question is, if we're reducing our food production capability by taking land out of productive use, what are we going to do to replace it? And we've been highlighting for quite a few years now the issue of gene editing. Well, the BBC's decided to get onto this, and I'll explain why they have done in a second. But BBC In Depth has published this article, "The Great Gene Editing Debate, Can If Be Safe and Ethical?" And this is their typo, so I just want to make sure everybody's clear about that. They do not understand the difference between the word if and the word it. So can if be safe and ethical? Now, just in case you're not sure, BBC In Depth is the new home and website, on the website and app, for the best analysis and expertise from our top journalists. So if you're wondering where the typos come from, it's from the BBC's top journalists. And they do offer a feedback button, so you can give your feedback if you want, maybe you would like to. But I wanted to highlight one particular aspect of this because, of course, the Precision Breeding Act, as it's known now, was passed a couple of years ago. So they have to say that at the time when that act was passed, many scientists working in the field were overjoyed. And they quote Professor Jonathan Napier saying, "I thought, great, this is going to uncork a whole area of activity in the public and private sector." But he says his hopes were soon dashed. The BBC reports for the law to come into effect, secondary legislation was required, and this was due to be passed by the Parliament this July. That was before the election, that was after the election. But the earlier than expected election meant that this was not voted on by MPs, and the act is currently in limbo. So the Precision Breeding Act, as the BBC calls it, and I have to say Charles called it the last time he mentioned it as well, is what it's known as. But I wonder why it has been called that, because of course in doing that they don't make the point that the words precision breeding were in brackets, and genetic technology has been effectively removed from the title, and perhaps that's for reasons that they don't want to highlight the genetic aspect of this. But I just wanted to remind everybody what this piece of legislation does, and should it get the secondary legislation passed, which the Labour government regime has said that it will do. It removes plants and animals produced, and this again is the government's typo in this case, remove plants and animals produced through precision breeding technologies from regulatory requirements applicable in England to the environmental release and marketing of genetically modified organisms. Introduce two notification systems, one for precision bred organisms used for research purposes and the other for marketing purposes. The the information collected will be published on the public register on gov.uk. Well, that hasn't happened because the secondary legislation hasn't been passed yet. Establish proportionate regulatory system for precision bred animals to ensure animal welfare is safeguarded. We will not be introducing changes to the regulations for animals until this system is in place. And finally, establish a new science-based authorization process for food and feed products derived from using precision bred plants and animals, again using gene editing. And so the question is, are we replacing food production on farmland, whether that be arable food production or animals, with food production in factories and labs and so on? And I see that is the direction of travel, and therefore we've got to be aware of that and making sure that this secondary legislation never gets passed.